Amazing. Welcome everyone to another edition of FestivalYA. I am very, very delighted to be again in the position to moderate these wonderful events. My name is Julia Dromereschi, or you can call me Jules, and I'm a book translator and a cultural journalist. And tonight I will be the one who will mediate your interaction with the wonderful Ava Reid, an author whom we have with us for 1 full hour so that you can ask her all the questions about her books and about her work and about herself that you want to ask. Welcome, Ava. We are very happy to have you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's really nice to be here.
Amazing. So, Ava is joining us from the United States, if I'm not mistaken. So she's on a very different time than we are. I think the day has just begun for you, right, Ava?
Yeah, I'm still having my coffee, so yeah.
Enjoy. That's amazing. So, I was just thinking, since we still have a couple of people joining us, to go very, very quickly through the rules that we have for this conversation of tonight or this morning for you. So what's gonna happen is that I will just ask a couple of questions for a quick warm-up, and then all the participants will have the chance to ask you their questions. But I want us to be organized so that everybody gets a chance. So what I will kindly ask the participants is, first of all, to turn on the cameras, if this is possible, because we would love to see you guys. We would love to see whom are we talking to. Second of all, if you want to ask a question, please use the Zoom button for raising your hand. You can find it in the line that shows at the bottom of your screens, or turn on your camera and just make me a sign. Okay, I'm going to be with my eyes stuck to the screen so that I can see you guys whenever you signal me. If you can't, or if you don't want to ask your questions directly, use the chat. Please write your questions over there, and I will make sure that Ava gets them. So prepare yourselves, because in a couple of minutes I will give the floor to you. So Ava, let's start. I'm sure you've been getting this question a lot, but maybe some people who are now following us haven't heard it or haven't seen your answers so far. So what exactly got you into writing? What's the story behind this?
I think I have a lot of friends of my same age group, kind of Gen Z millennial who started their writing the same way, which is fan fiction. So I started writing fan fiction of, my favorite series when I was about 11 years old, and then it just kind of grew from there.
What was the series?
So the first series was, and I don't know if you have translations of those, but it's the Warriors series, the middle grade series about cats.
Of
Like,
course. I've translated 6 of them actually, so
really? Oh my gosh, yeah,
yeah,
that was my
yeah.
first like obsession as a reader and a writer. So I was on like the message boards, like role playing, and I was writing my fan fiction.
That's amazing. I don't think I've ever met somebody who wrote fan fiction about the warrior cats, but there we
Really?
go. There-
I have so many friends who like have said
Really,
that they did the same thing, yeah.
that's amazing. I mean, there's a huge hype in Romania around them as well. I do every now and then hold a series of workshops focused on them with middle graders mostly, as you said. And the thing that is fascinating to me is that they keep coming, they keep
Yeah,
being written, and that's quite amazing that it's still a phenomenon after so many years.
I know. Well, there's so many books now. There's got to be like at least 100 books at
Yeah,
this
yeah, yeah. With all the spin-offs and everything, and the personal histories of all the cats and everything, it's
point. Yeah.
insane. But I'm sure that there has been a small or maybe a bigger step between fan fiction and actually deciding to write original fiction. So what made up your mind precisely?
I don't really remember. I think it just kind of felt like a logical step for me. I didn't study creative writing or English in college, but it was just always something that I wanted to do, and I kind of, it's not really a thing like growing up where people are like, oh, you can just be an author and that can be, you can make a living doing that and that can be your job. So, it took a lot of like research to figure out, oh, this is actually something you can do and, have it be your real profession. So I didn't really start thinking that maybe I could do that until college. I don't think.
Because you actually majored in political studies, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Would you say there is a connection between what you've studied and what you are writing?
Yeah, definitely. I studied and I did my papers on like ethnic nationalism and national identity, and I think that that is plays a role in pretty much all of my books.
Yeah, one can actually see that. So it's I think it's always nice to put a bit of what you've been studying or what you're interested in in the things that you're actually doing. So that's quite amazing. Um, that was the warm up, guys. So I will start encouraging everybody who has joined us in the meanwhile to have your questions at the ready and to make a show of hands, please, if you want to ask them directly or to start writing them in the chat so that I can voice them for you. Don't be shy. This is a very rare opportunity, and I would really, really love for you guys to profit. So, anyone further questions for Ava, please? Show of hands, write in chat. Remember to turn on your cameras if possible. Thank you so much for those who are already doing that. No one? Oh, what's going on, guys? Come on, I'm sure you've read her books, or at least one. Raise your hands who has read Ava's books. Uh-huh. So, we have a first question. While the emoticons appear, what is your favorite book of all time, Ava?
My favorite book of all time is and again, I'm not sure if this has been translated into Romanian, but it is the Gormenghast trilogy by Mervyn Peake, which is this gothic fantasy trilogy from the mid 20th century. And it's this really weird, dense, obscure work of Gothic fiction that's amazing, and I've really never read anything like it. And it also has this really interesting meta kind of narrative about it because the author, Mervyn Peake, was, as he was writing, he was slowly dying of this very aggressive form of dementia. So, like, his brain was dying as he was writing it. So, as the series goes on, it gets kind of even more incomprehensible and strange because of that. So, I don't know, it's a really amazing series. It's definitely not for everybody, but it's definitely like it's my Roman Empire.
This one hasn't been translated, unfortunately. I know of it. I know that it also has a very nice screen adaptation featuring John Rhys Meyers. It's an amazing one. It's from his youth. It's an early work of this actor.
Yeah.
And I've been really wanting to read the trilogy as well. So now that you're mentioning it, I'll definitely bump it up a bit on my reading list.
It's so good. It's very strange. Again, like I don't think there's anything else like it ever. And I've been trying my entire life to find something that, gives me the same feeling. And so far I've not been successful. But
It's very good to know. Okay, definitely bumping it up now. Um, Okay, have you ever had writer's block? And if so, how do you overcome it?
I think I'm definitely more of the type of writer where I have too many ideas and not enough time. Um, so I think that writer's block is kind of not too common for me, but if I ever am kind of stuck on how to execute, a plot point in the book, then usually what I'll do is just kind of walk around and listen to music, and that really like kind of frees up the ideas in my brain and like getting outside and just, kind of picturing scenes in my head. That's always really helpful to me. Also like talking to writer friends about things and just kind of, you know, getting a little more enthusiasm about whatever I'm working on. But I wouldn't say it's super common for me. It's usually like the opposite where I just have too many ideas.
Yeah, I was gonna grab a bit this idea that you just mentioned, because you said that you are talking to other writer friends. And I
Mhm.
think that I keep observing this in a lot of foreign authors, particularly women. I don't know if it's a thing or not, that they have these writing groups, these writing cliques, these sort of places where they support each other, they encourage each other. And I translate a lot of books with acknowledgements that
Mhm.
go on and stretch on pages, with thanks and dedications to people who have supported the author in writing the book. Is this a thing? This sort of writing groups? What would you say?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I just moved, but before I moved, I actually lived right down the hall from another author who I'm not sure she's been translated, but Allison Saft. We literally lived like 10 feet away from each other, so we were like, all of our books have acknowledgments were to each other, and yeah, and even, people I didn't know in real life, people I just met online, I've gotten really close to, and I think it's just because this industry is like a very tough and emotionally draining industry. And if you don't have friends who you can kind of commiserate with and who can kind of help you and give you advice, because it can also be, kind of obscure and opaque. And a lot of the things that happen are not like easy to research or to find out on your own. You kind of just have to know people and know how things work. So yeah, I think it's just, the nature of the industry that makes it having friends so valuable.
We're actually having Allison on Wednesday.
Oh, really? Oh my
Yeah.
God. That's so
I will be the one talking to her as well for moderating that session. I'm sure she will be happy that you mentioned her. I'll mention that to her
funny.
that you mentioned her. So that's very nice. I think I've seen you girls in other events together before, and I sort of I think I remember also from the acknowledgements, as now as you mention it, that you two are friends and are really supporting each other. So this is very cute, and I love this sort of coincidence a lot. I will keep taking the questions now because we're having more and more in the chat. What was the inspiration for studying drowning?
So I really wanted to write about these Shakespeare authorship theories, which are, essentially a group of theories that propose that Shakespeare wasn't the author of the works attributed to him, and maybe he wasn't even a real historical figure. And pretty much now these theories are entirely disproven and not really taken seriously, but historically they were taken quite seriously, and people went to like very extreme lengths to try and prove them. Like they were digging up graves to see if they could find like secret documents that were buried with bodies, and like they were inventing cipher machines because they thought there was like some code hidden in his works that would reveal the true author, which was just really interesting to me. And especially because like in the Anglosphere, Shakespeare is so incredibly important to like our identity, and especially to kind of like English national identity. So the idea, if he were proven to be a fraud, I think it would have like actually enormous implications, and it would have, these very personal implications for everyone who loved him as an author. And it just kind of went from there.
That's actually a theory that's not very well known outside certain circles. So I think it's quite important that you decided to approach it because I think it would make more people curious about it, to be honest. Um, we will go on with studying drowning because we have another question. Um, how come you decided to continue studying drowning? The ending was perfection. Do you have any concerns about the sequel?
Yeah, so it was, it was originally intended to be a standalone, and personally, I like a kind of open-ended ending. Like one of my favorite series ever, another middle grade series, is a series of unfortunate events, and that has a very like open-ended ending, and I remember that having a really big impact on me as a kid when I first read it. So I wanted it to be kind of open-ended, even though initially my editor tried to make me change the ending like three different times, and I was like, no, no, this is where I want to end it. But then it had a lot more success than I thought it would, and that my publisher thought it would. They didn't buy a sequel because they didn't expect it to do as well as it ended up doing, and then I got a lot of people were very angry about the ending because they saw it as a cliffhanger. And, the more and more I started to think about it, the more and more I felt like I had, still something more to say and more to explore in this world and with these characters. Yeah, so this will technically be my first duology, my first book I've ever written with a sequel. So I'm definitely a bit nervous about that, but also I'm excited because I know that there are so many readers who do love these characters and want to see more from them. So, yeah.
Can I ask when the sequel is supposed to come out?
Yeah, so it's coming out next August, I think August
Mm,
4th,
mhm.
the first week in August. Yeah.
Hmm, pretty tight.
Yeah, I know. I wrote it very, very quickly,
Mm,
which
mm,
was
mm,
interesting. But yeah.
mm. Yeah, well, maybe I get the chance to talk more about this process a bit later because now I have more and more questions for you. So, what I mostly love about your books is the atmosphere, says Roxana. I feel like both Juniper and Thorn and The Study in Drowning are very atmospheric and cinematic and would make great movies. Which one of your novels would you like to see turned into a movie or a series?
Um, I love horror movies so much, so probably Juniper and Thorn because that's my, most horror book, and I think that like seeing, like you said, I think seeing a lot of it on screen would be really cool. So yeah, probably Juniper and Thorn.
I would actually love to see that. And I don't know if it, as a movie, maybe as a short series or something like that. I don't
Yeah,
know.
like a mini series.
Yeah, I mean a series that would work, I think. Um, Theodora, can you share any details about your upcoming projects? She's asking, will you continue exploring folklore or will you take your storytelling in new directions?
Yeah, so the two books I have out next year are Fable for the End of the World, which is a bit of a departure for me because it's a dystopian sci-fi novel. Yeah, that will be my first non-fantasy book, so that's exciting, nerve-wracking. And then the sequel to Studying Drowning, A Theory of Dreaming in August, as I mentioned. And then after that, I have another duology, which will be published in 2026 and 2027. That's my next adult project. And I just finished getting my first feedback on that, which is very exciting. And that is a kind of grimdark fantasy that is inspired by this Italian Renaissance epic romance. So not quite folklore, but also, it has this source of literary inspiration.
You seem to be getting quite busy.
Yeah, yeah, I did not anticipate having this much on my plate, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, keeping my fingers crossed because as you describe it now, it's a lot of work coming your way, but I sure hope that the rewards are pretty much balanced, because I know that it can be a lot of stress in all this, because writing a book, it's not just the writing, but also the promoting and also the touring and everything. And I think that can get very, very busy and very, very tiring, right?
Yeah, definitely. Although I think in a weird way, doing the promotion actually makes me more grateful for the times when I get to just do the writing because that's really what I love and everything else just feels like work and the writing is just fun. Like that's why I do any of this is just so I can write.
That sounds amazing. I mean, one would expect it to be exactly the opposite way. Yeah, yeah, that's very nice. Thank you. We'll go on with the questions. Where do you look for new books to read? Do you stay within the realm of fantasy works, or do you venture into other genres?
I think I read a lot of different genres. I wouldn't say all genres, but pretty much anything speculative and also literary fiction. I'm really interested in reading, and also I read a lot of very, very old books. Like I mentioned, the Italian Renaissance epic, and Lady Macbeth is very inspired by the Lays of Marie de France. So I read, a lot of stuff, and I read, classical literature. My husband is a Roman historian, so there's a lot of like classical influence in my works too. So yeah, I don't know. I read pretty widely. Lots of things seem interesting to me, and I get inspiration from a lot of different sources.
That sounds very, very intriguing, but now it makes a lot of sense that you've been choosing this sort of different topics in your work. So there seems to be like some common things, like this maybe propensity for darker tales and this idea of reinterpreting certain things. But on the other hand, they're like very different one from another. So maybe this is one of the explanations.
Yeah.
A question from Marianne. I know this question is not about one of your books, but what advice would you give to a becoming author that struggles with organizing his book plot? Sometimes I feel like there are some things about the characters that I have to write about, but I don't want the entire book to be only about the characters' past. What should I do?
I'm such a bad person to ask about this because I don't outline any of my books before I write, which I know sounds very chaotic. But I really like to just write on the fly, and that's really fun and exciting for me. And if I outline a book, I feel like I get bored with the story and then I don't want to actually write it. But I would say that it's okay to do, if you want to like develop the characters, you can write as much as you want about that, and it won't necessarily make it into the final draft, but it's really helpful like as a writing exercise to do stuff like that. And I also, it's really interesting because I was thinking a lot about this with my 2026 book, is I wanted to really kind of capture this relationship between these two characters who had known each other their entire life, but without using flashbacks. So there are no flashbacks in the book. And I was watching Succession, the television show, and I was thinking about how well they do that, about how well they kind of show the character dynamics without ever having flashbacks. You know exactly what these characters' childhoods were like without ever, going back to them. You understand because they carry that, their experiences in their childhood with them through every scene. So I think, yeah, if you do want to kind of just write, a Word document of, the character's interiority or their past, even if that doesn't end up appearing on the final page, that's a very helpful exercise to do. And I know a lot of writers who do stuff like that.
I would like to maybe ask Marianne if he has a comment or if he wants to should talk maybe directly to Ava. I don't know if you feel like it. No, yes, maybe. Maybe not now, not right now. Okay, it's fine. We'll wait. We still have some time. It's fine. But I'm sure this was like very helpful advice. And I totally agree with you, Ava, on this thing about sort of bypassing flashbacks because I think that there are certain novels and also series, because you mentioned Succession, that have been overdoing it a bit. And then the people get a bit distracted and they don't know exactly when, what, to whom has happened. So it's always very nice when somebody manages to capture this past relation without going through flashbacks, which can get very tiring. Yeah. More questions from Malina. I absolutely loved Juniper Thorn. Are you planning on making more fairy tale retellings or fairy tale inspired novels?
I don't have any specific plans for one, but Lady Macbeth actually has a lot of fairy tale inspirations. There's this French fairy tale called The Green Serpent that inspired me a lot, and also the French fairy tale Donkey Skin, which has a ton of, variants from different cultures as well. So it's like kind of almost a vague retelling of those two fairy tales. I think that the fairy tales influence Lady Macbeth a lot as well.
Donkey Skin. Whoa, it's been a while since I heard that mentioned. You really seem to be digging out the rarest and weirdest of topics.
Yeah, definitely kind of obscure, but
Oh, it's good. Keep them coming. I love it. Right. So now we'll get a question from Ali. Which one of your books do you think is the best? And what would you recommend to a new reader? I started with A Study in Droning, and I can't wait to have Lady Macbeth in my hands this week.
which one do I think is the best? That's hard. I mean, I hope that every new book is better than the last. I hope that, I'm always improving my craft and improving as an author. So I would say that on like a craft level, I think Lady Macbeth is the best, but I think obviously, people have very different, emotional reactions and certain different things resonate with them. So I would say just start with whatever sounds the most interesting to you. Um, I always have a really big fondness for Juniper and Thorn as well. Like that's kind of a book that I feel like, again, on a craft level, it is very, very strong. But yeah, I think the best book that I've written is my 2026 book, and I'm really, really excited to be able to share more about that.
That sounds quite promising, actually. So something to look out for and something to look forward to. And yeah, guys, this is a very good advice, actually. Read the blurb, read the descriptions, maybe read other reviews before deciding. I would say it's a very good thing that would help you start, especially because now we have a lot of good reviews floating in the online space. We're lucky to have it. At the same time, I would like to remind you that we have amazingly reached already half of our conversation with Ava. So if I were in your shoes, I would profit. I would maybe decide to talk directly to her as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be a question. It can also be I don't know, curiosity or praise or anything you think about something you've read or you're about to read, written by her. So this is my encouragement to um, be brave and address her directly because this is such a nice opportunity. In the meanwhile, I will keep on with the questions asked in the chat room. So Adina is asking you, how was the process of writing Lady Macbeth?
So, Lady Macbeth was probably the easiest drafting process for any of my books. It's the shortest of any of my books, so that definitely helped a lot. It also helped that I had, the skeleton of the actual play to kind of, form an existing outline for what I was doing. So it was very, very easy. And I think that I wrote Lady Macbeth after I had kind of worked really hard on this other book, and then my agent and I had decided that we weren't going to try and submit it. So I was feeling, I didn't have a lot of confidence, so I just kind of wanted to write something that I felt like not that would be easy, but that I felt like would kind of give me some of my confidence back. So I wrote the whole book in about a month. And it was a really good experience. I knew kind of right from the outset what I wanted to do with the story, and then I was able to get through it really quickly, and it definitely gave me my confidence back in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I was actually, I will take a short lead and a small detour starting with that because you've been asked before, how do you deal with writer's block? And you said that's not really one of your issues, but how do you deal with this case of maybe disappointment or maybe down
Mhm.
times if they happen? How do you cope?
Yeah, so I think in that case, it really helped to just jump into something completely new and just to remind myself, like, okay, I can still write, and this is still something that I know I can do. And, even though this book will never see the light of day, it was still a very valuable writing experience for me, and I still learned a lot from it. So I think just trying to see everything is just a kind of learning experience. And, even if it's a failure, it still helps you grow as a writer.
I think that's very important to hold in mind because all the time we're dealing with all these young aspiring writers who think that if they had one of the so-called failures, as you said, using air quotes, then the world is gonna end and this is gonna be it for them. So maybe I think it's very valuable to hear that also a successful writer can deal with this kind of thing. And I think that's very heartwarming. I'm sorry if
No.
I'm getting like very, I don't know, if it's not comfortable for you, but I think that it shows that maybe you are also human and maybe it wasn't the right time, but maybe in 2 years, that book that you've been keeping, let's say, hidden and was considered a failure at the time will have its chance.
Yeah, and I think that it really is important to keep that in mind because failure happens at every single step of the process. Even if your book is successful in one respect, you're never going to have everything. There's still, even for my most successful books, I still, got negative trade reviews, or, I didn't get picked for, some book club or book box. So, like, every step of the way, even for the most famous authors, there is, failure, there is disappointment, and that's just, it's part of the job, and it's just part of life.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing this. I think it's very, very precious. We'll go on with other things. We have Theodora asking you if you can give us a spoiler for Fable for the End of the World.
Um, let me think. I think I've talked about this before, that it was very inspired by kind of the nostalgic dystopian young adult fantasy of the 2010s, which is the YA that I grew up with, the Hunger Games, Divergent, all of that. So I think it has a very nostalgic, almost like fan fiction-y kind of feel to it. And like this is really niche again, but it's also was inspired by the game Overwatch, and I don't know if anyone has played that, but Widowmaker's character, I had a phase of like kind of obsession with that game too. So yeah, there's a character that's kind of inspired by her and inspired by that, and I think it's probably my only book that could be described as fast paced in any way. It's this kind of, death gauntlet spectacle. So it's a very fast paced book, and that was fun to write because that's very different for me. Usually my books are very, slow burn. So
Yeah, that's true. And actually, you've just put that book of yours on my list because I've been a diehard fan of dystopias, and I also sort of grew up with classics already, classics we can say that you mentioned. So this should be really interesting. Hmm. Hmm. Good, good. Thank you. Um, let's see. We have Laura here asking a question that's already been answered maybe before she joined, but I will just repeat it so maybe we can make a short recap for her sake. So she's saying, your books are so diverse. Where does your inspiration come from?
Yeah, like I said, I think I got inspiration from such a huge variety of kind of sources. Like there are very few kind of genres that are like not interesting to me at all. So I think like, I read nonfiction, I read literary fiction, sci-fi, fantasy, and I also read a lot of like very old texts, like I mentioned before. Like my 2026 book is inspired by this Italian Renaissance epic romance, and Lady Macbeth is very inspired by the Lays of Marie de France, who's this medieval writer. And I take a lot of inspiration from, the classics, the Greek and Roman classics as well. So I think really just all over the place, and that kind of like exploratory aspect of reading and writing is really exciting to me. So yeah, pretty much from all over the place.
Thank you for this. We're going back to being very specific now. So we have another question from Roxana. She says, in a study in drowning, you came up with Emrys Myrddin, and I thought that every quote we got from him was very poetic. Have you ever considered writing poetry?
No, definitely not. And it's actually really funny because I found the poetry parts of A Study in Drowning very hard to write because I don't think that I'm good at it at all. And I wanted it to be to like, follow actual kind of like rhyming schemes and like and stuff like that. So that was really hard because I don't think my brain works in that way at all. And in the sequel, there's a lot more poetry, and that was also really hard for me. And I have some friends who do poetry, and I'm always very impressed by it because I think that it's very hard.
It's something quite common that I keep getting into somehow. But people who don't believe that they can be very poetic or very lyrical actually get to be it. So maybe it's something there. Maybe it's something there. Right. We have a question from Theodora. She says, "Where does your passion for old and obscure stories come from?"
Um, Partially probably from my husband, who's a classicist. So we have just a house full of very ancient texts all the time, shelves and shelves of, obscure and ancient work, a lot of which is really super interesting. The whole like kind of anecdote in Lady Macbeth about the eels, that was, some like what that eel pit guy was a real guy in ancient Rome, and that was just kind of a one-off like anecdote that my husband told me, but it made a really big impression on me. So that's definitely a part of it. Um, yeah, and I think I just am one of those people who's very prone to like falling down Wikipedia rabbit holes and finding a lot of, obscure, interesting stuff there.
I would certainly love to go to one of your friends' get together or parties or something and to hear the anecdotes that are circulating. Seems very, very fun.
Yeah.
We also have a question from Instagram. Do you feel like your characters are a reflection of yourself or the people in your life? And which one of your characters do you relate to the most?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think in, the strictest sense, as an author, we can't write anything that we don't know about. So yeah, like in that way, my characters are all reflections of, things that I think and feel. Um, Probably most like Effie, just because as a YA book, I felt like I really had to go back and think about what it felt like to be a teenager. And that wasn't that long ago for me, but it was still, there's still some distance there. So I was very much thinking about, my own experiences of being 18 and, being in college. So I think that most of what's on the page is very similar to my experiences, but I also identify with Marlinchen from Juniper and Thorn a lot.
Yeah, I've actually read, I think, a couple of Q&As in which you were mentioning FPS being somehow maybe remotely based on your own experiences, and you talked about how your uh, own academia story sort of inspired at least parts of her experiences.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think that maybe I don't know if it's your case, maybe there is a bit of yourself in at least every protagonist or every character that. And my curiosity, speaking of characters, would be, is there any you know, characters, a lesser character of a smaller importance, let's say in your books that you're particularly fond of?
Um, oh my gosh. I had a really good time writing all of the characters in Juniper and Thorn, like the monsters that are in the garden and like her dad, who's obviously, the villain, but he was really, really fun to write because he had all these like very dramatic monologues that were really fun. So yeah, I think Juniper and Thorn probably has my favorite kind of extended cast of characters.
That's nice. That's nice. I sort of agree. So yeah. We have another Theodora with another question. Do you want to write romance?
I mean, I think all of my books have romance in them, but I still, I don't feel like actually writing romance is necessarily one of my strongest suits as a writer, which maybe sounds kind of weird because, like I said, romance is in all of my books. But I still remember, like, when I was working on The Wolf and the Woodsman, my debut, that was kind of when I first become friends with Allison. And I remember doing revisions, and I was like, Allison, please help me write romance. Like, I really need your tips to, like, develop it. And I remember her saying, like, really, like, helping me so much, like, develop the romance. In that book and like just make me a better writer of romance in general because she had all of these things that like these tips and things that I'd never thought of myself. So yeah, I don't think I would ever write like a category romance novel because I just don't think I'm very good at it. But yeah, Allison helped me a lot.
I'll make sure to mention that to her again, honestly.
Ask her for her advice because she's very
Yeah,
good
yeah,
advice.
yeah, we will definitely. Another question from Laura now. Let's see, will we ever see a novella maybe of Angaret? The story sounded so good, and I would love to read her story.
Um, Gosh, I don't know. So Angharad is basically just kind of a reskin of a kind of story archetype that already exists, and it's called a fairy ballad, which is essentially just this story structure from the British Isles that's about a young woman who is taken captive by a fairy or an elf, and all these things are basically interchangeable in British folklore. And then through her kind of cleverness, she's able to escape his torments. So probably the most famous one in the Anglosphere is Scarborough Fair, and Simon and Garfunkel did this song version of it, which really made it very popular. But there are like tens, if not hundreds, of versions of this story. So Unhard is really just an example of a fairy ballad in novel form. So for me, because like this is just such a well-known kind of story archetype, I don't know if I would ever write like a novella version of it, but the snippets were really, really fun to write, and we see a lot more of them in the sequel, actually. So
So this can be something to again look forward to, Laura. Make sure you get your hands on the sequel when it's out. Okay, I have one more question in the chat room, and with this one, I will kindly remind you guys that we have around 15 minutes left with Ava tonight or this morning, her time. So I would like to invite you also to interact directly to her if you feel like it, if you gathered a bit your courage, and if you want to do that, please just raise a hand, and I will give you the floor. So before that, we have another question from Roxana, not books related. She would love to know what other games you like besides Overwatch.
I'm actually not really much of a video game person, probably partially because I was not allowed to play video games as I was growing up because my parents were really strict. But I really enjoyed The Witcher. I was just talking about that with a friend. The Witcher games are like really awesome, super fun, and just amazing like pieces of fantasy world building. Yeah, so those are super fun. Um, yeah. Dark Souls games also were kind of an inspiration for me as well. I know my husband and all my friends have been obsessed with Baldur's Gate 3, so I should probably play that at some point. Yeah.
Isn't that a bit old? I don't know. I mean, my knowledge of games is pretty not.
Yeah, Dark Souls is old, but they're very like iconic,
Yeah,
famous like video
exactly.
games for kind of what they are.
Pretty much. You have another question, not book related, because now people are getting curious also about other things that you like, apparently. So this comes from Adina. She's curious what artists do you listen to, and if you've ever wanted to write a book inspired by a song.
By a song. I feel like me and like every other fantasy writer is obsessed with Hosier and also Florence and the Machine. Like every single book playlist I have features like multiple songs from them. Um and I also listen to like a lot of movie scores. Like for Lady Macbeth, I listen to the Green Knight score and the Northman, music from the Northman and music from Dune. Dune has an amazing soundtrack. So yeah, those are kind of my favorite writing related things to listen to. But like not writing related, I have literally been listening to every Chapel Rowan song. Like obsessed.
That's a very good choice. Very inspired. I encourage of it. Oh, that's amazing. Thank you. We have another question from Theodora in the meanwhile. She's asking, what book would you recommend if she wanted to read something similar in vibes with a study in droning?
You should read Starling House by Alex Harrow. Alex is another friend of mine, and I remember we were like reading each other's books at the same time, and they came out, I think, like a month apart, and we were like, wow, we kind of wrote the same book. Like they're very, very similar books in like kind of very eerie ways, that are really funny. And Alex is just an amazing author and like a great person. And yeah, so Starling House, definitely.
That happens to be one of my favorites as well. So,
So good.
yeah, she has a +1 for that one. Definitely, definitely. We also have a link, guys. We have a link in the chat for Alex's book if you're interested in browsing and seeing if you'd like to also read that one. So this is my cue to let you know that we have around 10 minutes left with Ava. 10 minutes, guys. I know time flies when we're having fun. In my opinion, I've been having a lot of it, and I hope you too. But I'd really, really love to encourage you once again to maybe use these minutes to interact directly. I don't think anyone would mind hearing some other voices than mine and hers. I mean, no, Ava definitely would love to hear from you and to hear and to listen to you, but maybe some people just want to tell you something directly. No one, nothing. Oh, why? I love being people's voice, but I would really, really love to hear a couple of you guys as well. But it's fine. The chat works fine as well. So maybe some last minutes to decide upon questions or curiosities or anything else you want to put? Oh, I have a hand. I have a hand. Oh, Roxana.
So I don't have a hand button because I'm a co-host, but I really wanted to ask you something because you've mentioned Alison twice.
Yeah.
And I do love you both as writers, and I've also stalked a bit on Instagram, and I see you mentioning each other quite often. And I was really, really, really curious which one of her books is your favorite.
Oh, A Far Wilder Magic, I think is my favorite
That's
of
great,
hers.
great.
Yeah, and I think that she probably feels the same way about it. I think that that's her favorite book of hers as well. And I remember being like, we were, friends for the entire like process of her writing that book. And I was at like the launch for the book, like I was her in conversation partner. So yeah, I feel like that's just kind of like emblematic of our friendship as well. So it's very special to me. But yeah, definitely A Far Wilder Magic.
That's amazing. I think I love it even more now that I know this little fun fact. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Roxana. I just wanted to tell Ava that it's very interesting that these two books, yours and Alison's, have been translated for the same book publisher. And in my opinion, they also have a similarity in covers. So they
Yeah.
do have a same vibe, basically. And I find it's very, very nice that you guys can actually have them and compare them and say, look, we are twins.
Yeah, definitely. I love the cover for A Far Wilder Magic too. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, both of them are, I think, and it's very lovely. And I would like to, kindly suggest the publishing house if they keep translating them to like your books, both of your books, to keep making maybe the same choices in respect to covers.
Yeah.
And that brings me to a question because we have a couple of minutes left, and since nobody seems to be very eager to interact directly. Okay, I do have a question, but first I'm going to ask mine because I can. Speaking about book covers, um, are you motivated by them to buy books, Ava? Like,
Yes, definitely. I'm kind of a snob about covers. Like, I unfortunately kind of do judge a book by their covers, maybe because I also do like graphic design myself, so I'm like a little snobby about it. It's to the point where like sometimes when a cover gets revealed, my friends will like send it to me and be like, "What do you think?" So yeah, unfortunately, I do judge books by their cover, and I usually try to have a lot of a say in my own covers because yeah, I would be very unhappy if I ended up with a cover that I didn't like.
speaking of which, I just want to mention that the cover for Lady Macbeth is brilliant, and in
It's
my opinion, delicious. It's just
yeah,
my kind of cover.
yeah, I agree. I love it.
Okay, I'm gonna take another question from Ali, and then if no one else offers, I will finish with the question from Adeline. So first of all, Ali, who is your favorite fantasy author?
Picking just one is really hard. I'll have to give a couple. George R. R. Martin, obviously. I think that that's like goes without saying. Jacqueline Carey as well. Cashil's Dart series was very influential to me also. Um, and I mentioned before Mervyn Peake and the Gorman Gas trilogy as like those are probably my favorite books of all time. So yeah, definitely.
I feel so emotional right now because you're maybe the first person who acknowledges the existence of Jacqueline Carey. I'm so happy. I mean, back in my life journal times, I used to be such a fan, and I have all her trilogies, and I've been saving money to buy them because back then you couldn't really buy them in Romania. We didn't have that many English books, so I've been pestering my online American friends to get them for me, and then we'd met in Budapest or something like that, so that I can get them. So Jacqueline is such a favorite of mine, and she's such a classic, and she writes something so unique, and I'm so distressed by the fact that she's not translated. So
Yeah,
yeah.
her books are amazing. I'm so glad to hear you're a fan as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So this is for the publishing houses in Romania, guys. If you decide to translate Jacqueline Carey, I'm here. I'm free. I really want to do it. Thank you very much. I would love to. So I have a hand up from Laura. I will give her the floor, and then I will end with Adeline. Please, Laura.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm in my browser and don't have a hand up button, so I just improvised. No more questions. I would just like to express my appreciation for everything I read from you. I read Lady Macbeth just last week. It was great. So I read A Study in Drowning last fall, and the atmosphere, honestly, I mean, I read a lot all day, every day, but not every book gets through like that one did. So I remember just sitting on my couch and tucked in because I felt the cold and the wetness, the rain from your book. So heads down, honestly, great job. And Lady Macbeth, I remember I actually imagined a castle in Scotland I visited about 10 years ago, maybe. So it was very much alive. Everything that happened in your book, I could totally imagine it. And she was a great character. So I would just like to express my appreciation. And I can't wait to read Juniper and Thorn. It's on my TBR and everything that you put out there. So thank you and
No,
great job.
thank you so much. That's so sweet. I love hearing that.
Thank you so much, Laura, for voicing that.
Thank you.
And as I was saying, if there's no one else, I would like to finish this round of Q&A with Adelina's question, because I feel that it would bring a positive vibe to our conversation. And then I will look forward to the lovely girls from Cărturești if they want to wrap this up. So Adeline is asking you, Ava, what message would you have for your younger self that just started writing?
Oh my gosh. I would say, I don't know, it's very cheesy, right? But I would say just keep writing the things that you really love and that you really want to write, and don't lose like that love for writing and that joy for writing, because it's a very tough industry and you won't survive in it unless you really feel like the love for what you're doing and the love for what you're creating.
I think that's a very good, very sound survival advice. I actually love what you're doing. That's very nice, Ava. Thank you so much. So yeah, that has been it, sort of. I feel that I've just warmed up, and I feel that I just started, but that's it. We're on a schedule here, so I would really like to respect that. And before, as I said, giving the floor to the lovely girls from Cărturești, just to wrap this up, I would like to ask a final question, Ava, since you've placed some of your books action in Hungary, which is one of our neighbors. Have you ever been tempted to write something placed in Romania?
Maybe I've written, yeah, Hungary and Ukraine. So maybe I will go back to Eastern Europe at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear that we have a lot of sources of inspiration and a lot of obscure stories. So if you're really into this, make sure you signal it to us, and we can help you with
I will. Thank you.
further stuff. Yeah. Thank you. So for everybody, and especially for Ava, it has been an honor and a pleasure to be the host of this session. As I said, I've learned a lot of things. and I did get a couple of confirmations that my tastes are very good. Thank you.
They
Um,
are.
yeah, just kidding, just kidding. But what I would like for everybody who joined us and for everybody who is watching and everybody who will be watching this online, to get also some inspiration, be it in their writing, be it in their reading. So I really, really hope this conversation will help you guys discover more books and feel more supported in your work as maybe future writers. So thank you so much from my part, Ava, giving the mic to the girls from Cărturești. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. We will release you now. Thank you for being with us. And for everyone else, see you in the next calls with our other authors and, of course, Alison Saft. Thank you and bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.